Imagine being in your 20s, trying to build your own life and reputation, when suddenly the world discovers that your father flew you on a convicted sex offender's private jet to what's been described as a shooting weekend. You didn't choose that trip. You were probably told it was just a weekend away. Maybe you didn't even know the full story about who Jeffrey Epstein was or what he'd been convicted of. But now those flights, costing thousands of pounds, are in official documents. Your name is attached to his name forever, and you have to navigate the aftermath of choices you never made. This is the nightmare princesses Beatrice and Eugenie are living through. And the real tragedy isn't just what happened to them. It's how nobody in their family protected them from this situation in the first place. Today, we're talking about what it means to be collateral damage in someone else's scandal, how children pay for their parents' mistakes, and what Beatrice and Eugenie's situation teaches us about accountability across generations. Hello viewers, before we dive into this fascinating story of how Princess Beatrice and Eugenie's involvement, please take a moment and subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Your support allows us to update you with more fascinating news from the British monarchy. Documents related to the Epstein case revealed that Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie were flown on Jeffrey Epstein's private jet for what was described as a shooting weekend. The flights reportedly cost around £3,500, paid for by a convicted sex offender to transport the daughters of a British prince. This wasn't a random commercial flight where they happened to be on the same plane. This was Epstein's private jet, arranged as part of his relationship with their father, taking them to an event that was part of the social circle Andrew maintained with Epstein. The dates matter too. These flights occurred after Epstein's 2008 conviction, after it was public knowledge that Jeffrey Epstein was a sex offender, after any reasonable person would have cut ties completely. But Andrew didn't cut ties, and his daughters, whether they understood the full implications or not, were brought into that continued relationship. Now, here's what's crucial to understand. There is absolutely no suggestion that Beatrice and Eugenie did anything wrong. There's no allegation they witnessed anything inappropriate or participated in anything questionable. By all accounts, they went on what they thought was a normal weekend trip. But their names are now in Epstein files. Their presence on those flights is documented, and they have to live with that association for the rest of their lives. Let's be brutally honest about what this represents: a catastrophic failure of parental judgment. Andrew had one job when it came to Beatrice and Eugenie: protect them. Not just physically, but protect their reputations, their futures, their ability to build lives not overshadowed by scandal. And he failed, spectacularly. When you're a parent, you're supposed to think about how your choices will affect your children. You're supposed to put their well-being ahead of your own comfort or convenience. You're supposed to protect them from situations that could harm them, even if those situations don't seem immediately dangerous. Andrew knew who Epstein was. He knew what Epstein had been convicted of. He knew that maintaining a relationship with Epstein was controversial. And he brought his daughters into that relationship anyway. Think about the calculation there. Andrew valued his friendship with Epstein, or whatever benefits that friendship provided, more than he valued protecting his daughters from association with a convicted sex offender. That's not a mistake. That's not an error in judgment. That's a choice that prioritized the wrong things. And here's what makes it even worse. Andrew had resources that most parents don't have. He had security advisors, private secretaries, PR people, lawyers, all kinds of professionals whose job was to help him make good decisions. Any one of them could have said, "Sir, taking your daughters on Jeffrey Epstein's plane is a terrible idea." Maybe they did say it. Maybe Andrew ignored them. Or maybe everyone around him was so used to enabling his poor judgment that nobody spoke up. Either way, Beatrice and Eugenie paid the price. Now let's talk about the impossible position these young women are in. Beatrice and Eugenie love their father. By all accounts, they have a close relationship with him. They've stood by him throughout this scandal. They've been photographed with him. They've defended him. They've maintained that family bond. And they should. He's their father. Love doesn't stop because someone makes terrible choices. But loving him doesn't mean they aren't also victims of those choices. Imagine trying to build a professional life. Beatrice works in business, Eugenie in the art world. while your surname is Windsor and your father's association with Jeffrey Epstein keeps making headlines. Imagine every job interview, every professional introduction, every new social situation coming with the unspoken question, "That's Andrew's daughter, right?" The Epstein one. Imagine planning your wedding, which Beatrice did in 2020, and having to consider whether the media coverage will focus on your marriage or on your father's scandals. Imagine your sister's wedding getting similar treatment. Imagine wanting to start a family and knowing your children will grow up with this as part of their family history. That when they're old enough to Google their grandfather, this is what they'll find. Beatrice and Eugenie didn't choose any of this. They were brought along on those flights as daughters, not as decision makers. They trusted their father to protect them, and he didn't. And now they're stuck defending him publicly while privately dealing with the consequences of his choices. There's something particularly painful about watching Beatrice and Eugenie navigate this situation, and it's the loyalty trap they're caught in. See, if they distance themselves from Andrew, they'll be criticized for abandoning their father when he needs them most. How could they turn their backs on family? People will say. They'll be painted as cold or disloyal or fair-weather daughters. But if they stand by him, which they have, they're seen as enabling his behavior or being naive about what he's done. Their support gets interpreted as endorsement. There's no winning move here. They're trapped between love and optics, between private loyalty and public perception. And here's what's really unfair. Nobody criticizes Andrew for putting them in this position in the first place. The narrative is all about what Beatrice and Eugenie should do now, not about how Andrew should have protected them from ever being in this situation. This is a pattern we see over and over in families dealing with scandal. The person who created the problem gets sympathy. He's struggling. He's made mistakes. He needs support. But the people dealing with the collateral damage of those mistakes? They're expected to just handle it gracefully. Beatrice and Eugenie are handling it gracefully. They've been dignified. They haven't given inflammatory interviews. They haven't thrown their father under the bus. They've maintained their own lives and careers while supporting their father through an impossible situation. But the fact that they're handling it well doesn't mean they should have had to handle it at all. We have to talk about Sarah Ferguson's role in this too, because this isn't just about Andrew's judgment. It's about both parents. Sarah and Andrew were divorced, but living together during much of the Epstein relationship. Sarah herself accepted money from Epstein, which she's admitted was an error in judgment. So both parents were involved in maintaining ties with Epstein. Both parents normalized that relationship for their daughters. Both parents failed to draw the line that should have protected Beatrice and Eugenie from ever being associated with him. When parents are united in poor judgment, children have no advocate. There's no voice of reason saying, "This isn't okay for our kids." There's no one prioritizing the daughter's long-term well-being over short-term convenience or financial benefit. Beatrice and Eugenie were surrounded by adults making bad choices. Their father, their mother, probably various staff and hangers-on who all went along with the Epstein relationship because it was easier than standing up to a prince. And now those young women are living with consequences they couldn't have prevented. Here's what Beatrice and Eugenie's nightmare teaches us, because this dynamic exists in families everywhere, not just royal ones. First, your choices as a parent don't just affect you. They affect your children, often in ways you can't predict or control. Every friendship you maintain, every business relationship you justify, every moral compromise you make could become part of your kid's story. Second, children shouldn't have to pay for their parents' mistakes, but they often do. It's not fair. It's not right. But it's reality. Which means parents have a responsibility to think about how their choices will impact their children's futures, not just their own present. Third, loyalty to family doesn't mean defending indefensible choices. You can love your parent and still recognize they made terrible decisions. You can support someone while acknowledging they were wrong. Beatrice and Eugenie are navigating that nuance, but our culture doesn't always make room for that complexity. Fourth, when powerful people face consequences for their actions, the people around them often face worse consequences despite having less control over the situation. Andrew has been stripped of titles and patronages, but he still lives in a mansion and receives financial support. Beatrice and Eugenie have to build careers and reputations while carrying his baggage. Think about your own family. Are there choices being made now that your children will have to explain or defend later? Are there relationships being maintained that could become problematic? Are there compromises being justified that will look different in hindsight? Let's imagine for a moment that Andrew had made different choices. What if, after Epstein's 2008 conviction, Andrew had completely cut ties? What if he'd said, "Whatever friendship we had, I can't maintain it given what you've done"? What if he'd never taken his daughters on Epstein's plane? What if he'd protected them from any association with that world? Beatrice and Eugenie would still be princesses facing public scrutiny. That comes with the territory. But they wouldn't be in Epstein files. Their names wouldn't appear in legal documents related to one of the most notorious scandals of our time. They could build their lives without that shadow. That alternate reality was completely possible. It required one thing: Andrew prioritizing his daughter's well-being over his own desires. He didn't make that choice. And now Beatrice and Eugenie live with the consequences of that failure forever. The tragedy is that they seem to be genuinely good people. They've been involved in real charity work. They've built careers. They've conducted themselves with dignity. By all accounts, they're decent, hard-working young women trying to use their privilege responsibly. But all of that gets overshadowed by their father's scandal and their unwitting association with it. If Beatrice and Eugenie ever happen to see this, and I hope they don't, because I'm sure they've had enough of people discussing their family, I'd want them to know this. You didn't deserve this. You didn't choose it. And you don't owe the world an explanation for choices you didn't make. The way you've handled this situation, with grace, dignity, and loyalty to your father despite everything, shows remarkable character. You've refused to throw him under the bus. You've maintained your own integrity while supporting him through his crisis. But please know that supporting your father doesn't mean accepting responsibility for his choices. You can love him without carrying his shame. You can stand by him without letting his mistakes define you. Your lives are your own. Your reputations should be based on your choices, your work, your character. Not on a weekend trip you took years ago without understanding the full implications. You deserved parents who protected you from this. The fact that you didn't get that protection isn't a reflection on you. It's a reflection on them. Beatrice and Eugenie's Epstein nightmare, those 3,500-pound flights to a shooting weekend that now live in official documents forever, is a stark reminder that scandal doesn't respect innocence. These young women did nothing wrong, but they're paying for their father's poor judgment anyway. They're navigating a situation they didn't create, defending a parent who didn't protect them, and building lives in the shadow of choices they never made. If you're a parent watching this, let their story be a warning. Your choices ripple forward into your children's lives in ways you can't always predict. The relationships you maintain, the compromises you make, the judgment calls you get wrong, these don't just affect you. They become part of your children's story. Protect your kids from your mistakes. They deserve that much. If you're someone dealing with the fallout of a parent's choices, you're not alone. You don't have to defend those choices to love the person who made them. You can be loyal without accepting blame for things you didn't do.